And Dr. Wayne Brough is now going to tear Dr. Fleischer apart. And Wayne is Chief Economist and Vice President for Research at FreedomWorks.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, Trey did sort of lay things out there in a very negative way, but I think there are changes that have occurred that provide new rules of the game in a way that do offer political entrepreneurs a better stake in the game, a better chance to make change. And I think over time we will see some benefits. So I'm definitely a little bit more optimistic than Trey. And part of it goes back, again, it's sort of this Hayekian story and about information and the power that markets provide. And if you go back to his article in 1945, the two things he said, the prices are this important bit of information that allows us all to coordinate our activities. And and a lot of times people focus on prices and how they convey this information. But just as important, I think, is the role of coordination that he was talking about. And the internet is such a tool for doing this kind of coordination. It really fundamentally changes the way markets have worked. It's just a massive expanse of information, and it allows us all to do things that 5-10 years ago we would never have been able to do. There's buyers and sellers all over the world finding each other in ways that were almost impossible just a decade ago. So there are some real benefits to the internet, and these benefits, some people call it the long tail where the market's changing, or others call it mass customization, where any individual goes online and instead of buying the black Model T from Ford, they buy whatever fancy car they desire with every little bell and whistle they want to put on it. And that's something that just happens in the way we produce things now. And it's a fundamental change in organizing society and organizing and coordinating plans. So this is Adam Smith talked about the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. And in this situation, the extent of the market has just gone exponentially much larger over even year over year. It's 400–500% if you look at these numbers. So the size of the market is just expanding so fast. You have people that can specialize, you have people that can use new tools, and you have them finding each other on the internet. And it's a much more vibrant world that we live in. I mean, there's if you look at the statistics, there's 5 billion internet-enabled devices in the world. There's 2 billion users worldwide. There's 250 million blogs. Facebook just last year alone added 250 million new users. So these are powerful trends of empowerment to individuals to do what they want and express their demand in a way that they couldn't say 10 years ago. And this is something that is radically changing not just the markets where we buy goods and services, but political markets too. I mean, the way we participate in politics is fundamentally changing. As Matt mentioned, it's not the 3 nightly news channels anymore. You can go online and find 100 news channels or 1,000 news channels if you're a junkie and just looking for this kind of stuff. So there are things that have changed in the way we deal with politics. And I think what the internet has done is this whole notion of disintermediation. We're getting rid of the middleman in a lot of places, and it's also a fair amount of creative destruction going on in the political markets. I remember when I first started working in Washington, there were actual entire industries that all they did was Xerox information that the agencies put out because there was no other way to get it. So they turned around and sold this to these interest groups that Trey was talking about for a very handsome price and made quite a profit. And you had this entire information industry that sort of ruled Washington. That's all gone now. None of these agencies, you can go on any agency's website, find their latest Federal Register listings, find their latest rules. It's a different way of looking at Washington. It's a different way of working in Washington. And the other thing is, there is creative destruction. The downside of that was we wiped out that information part. Well, that's probably a good thing for us. But an upside of it is the ability for entrepreneurs to do new things. And Matt mentioned that we've been doing some new things. And we've developed this thing called Freedom Connector, which is basically a Facebook page for activists. It's based on where they're located geographically, and it allows these people to know who's in their area, who's also an activist, Are there events in their area that they might be interested in going to? So the costs of participating are dropping significantly. And by doing that, we're making a much more vibrant and market for political participation. And when we do that, I think we don't have to be as pessimistic as trade, because there are benefits to this new world of politics and this new way of doing business in politics. And then the Tea Party is a clear example of that. It's something that emerged out of this whole new world of technology and information, and it had a very big impact on the last election. And I think we're poised to see that it's going to be a staying power. And I would say maybe I shouldn't say it's necessarily the Tea Party. It's going to be the political entrepreneur. The political entrepreneur is going to always have an opportunity in this new world, whether they're called a Tea Partier or just an activist or whatever. They have these tools at their beck and call now, and it allows them to make these new markets and make new decisions. But what I want to do right now is sort of compare this to the government and what the government's doing. The government experienced this entire revolution in information just like the rest of the world did, just like we did, just like every other country did. And for consumers, we're clearly better off because of this. If you look at government, is there any evidence you can point to suggest that government is improving the way it governs, or the governance is more efficient today because of the internet? I mean, you may have debit cards to collect your AFDC payments or something, but the broader schemes of government are just as bad as they were before and I think this is because Hayek and Mises in the socialist calculation debate, they talked about if there was just no way that if you had the government could have all the information to regulate, they couldn't get that information of time and place. And then their opponents said, well, if you give them a big enough computer, they'll have the information, and one day they'll be able to do just as good as the market. And we're at that point where we have that kind of information. It's flowing everywhere. They're not doing well. And I think it's because of something that is more fundamental than just the ability of prices to inform and coordinate. And that is the institutions of government are top-down. You give them all the information of time and place that you want, and they're never going to be able to make a decision that's efficient, because the way government works is once you get away from, and this is Buchanan and Tulloch pointed this out, once you get away from unanimity as a decision criteria, government decisions are always posed to these problems of agency, problems of collective action. To the institutions are just wrong for government to ever get the information right. And if you look at the way government rules, from how you make legislation, you have the Roberts Rules of Order that force decisions on things, parliamentary tactics. All of these things are designed to exclude and pare down the information, so those in that world can come to a conclusion and pass legislation. So in a sense, the institutions are there to push information aside and say, well, we want to make a decision. And as I said, once you get away from unanimity, you're in a world where you're worried about redistribution rather than economic growth or prosperity, because that's what the government does. It brings in $1.3 trillion from taxpayers and then decides who gets that money at the end of the day. So it's a completely different model of top-down management, and I don't think you can get around the problems of that. And so let me close and say one of the things I think that leaves us with the benefit of is the government is stuck in a world where it's never going to be able to use this new information efficiently. We, on the other hand, are in a world where we've been able to absorb that into our political strategies, absorb it into the way we deal with Washington, and in ways I think that even allow us to gain ground against the entrenched status quo interest groups that have been in Washington for decades. Even they are faced with a new competitor that has a seat at the table, and it's groups like FreedomWorks and some of the other groups around town that make sure that that's the way the market works. So I'm not as pessimistic as Trey. It is maybe a Sisyphean task in a sense, because it's a very, the fight is always there, and you're day in, day out, no matter how good your reforms are, you have to worry about the next day where the reforms may fall apart. So it's an ongoing process, but I think the institutions are there, and the abilities of the internet to allow new activists to get into that market and actually make some positive changes.
Thank you, Wayne.